Hello, welcome to this deep dive for Public Discourse. My name is Nathaniel Peters. I'm one of Public Discourse's contributing editors. And in this series, we sit down with some of our authors to explore more deeply an article that they've written for us over the past year. And I'm delighted to have here with me today Nathan Schlueter, a professor from Hillsdale College, who I got to know, I don't know, 17 or 18 years ago through the Intercollegiate Studies Institute, and who I've been delighted to know and keep up with ever since. I'm always glad when Nathan decides to write for us. And I especially enjoyed the article that he wrote for us recently, Boys to Men, which was not, in fact, a review of any new music to come out from that group, but was an article on masculinity today, and on some of the problems that young men face, some of their questions, and how we can guide them and form them along the way. So I wanted to just kick this off, Nathan. Um, you've been teaching now, I think of it mainly at Hillsdale, but elsewhere too for a while now. How have students changed over the past decade? And especially young men, why write an article like this now? Or why did the article take the shape it did today in a way that was different from, 10 or 15 years ago?
First of all, let me say thank you, Nathan, for having me on your podcast. And let me tell you and your listeners how much I appreciate the work of Public Discourse. What a great online journal that is, and such a source of encouragement for me and others. And I will also tell your viewers, if they're viewing, that you don't look a day older than you did when I met you 17 years ago, though you are three sons further along, married and three sons further along. So may you be blessed with your youthfulness until you're 80 or however old God gives you to live. Um,
Thank you. I'll
so,
take it.
so at the request of some students back in 2012, I came to Hillsdale in 2005. 2012, some students asked me to teach a course on the theology of the body, and that had unexpected success. And so I retooled it not long after that to be a course called The Philosophy of Love, Sex, and Marriage. And what I began seeing immediately when I taught this course, and it's something I also already kind of saw just being in the culture and having kids in the culture, that the script for dating, courtship, marriage, etc., had just completely broken down. The students were very, very hungry for some guidance and direction, and were just kind of lapping up everything in this class. And so I really designed it to be a catch-all for everything, for sexual ethics, for thinking about romantic desire and agape love, for reading some great literature. We do gender ideology, same-sex
Mm.
attraction, pornography, feminism, other topics we treat in there. So it's a great experience. And to answer your question, when I first taught that course in 2012, uh, did not seem to be a preoccupation with what it means to be a man. There was a session on feminism, and that seemed natural and appropriate. I think just in the population of students that I teach, I saw a little bit of anxiety among some of the guys, maybe in the culture, about their manliness. That there was there were maybe some occasional atypical, gender atypical guys who maybe didn't do the sorts of things that guys usually do, stereotypically, and we're kind of looking for a little bit more help and encouragement there. But around 2000, I'd say 16, 17, I really did see a sea change in the young men in the class. And it was largely the influence of what has now become known as the manosphere or the alt-right influences. I just saw a very so it was slowly dawning on me, where are these guys getting this sudden cynicism and anger and hostility and kind of skepticism even about some of the more hopeful themes that I had sort of built into the class initially. And that just kind of grew so that by 2019, I incorporated a whole new unit into that class, choosing an infelicitous title, masculinism, just to match feminism. I thought, okay, I need a masculinism unit as well, because there's a lot of interest right now among these men and women about not just
Mm,
about feminism and female identity and how to reconcile careers and homemaking or whatever, but there are these very, very live questions among the men about
mm,
about their role in the culture and about what it means to be a man, and a strong attraction I saw in them to um, what I think were more extreme forms of stereotypical masculinity that
yeah.
we're seeing. And so that has been just a very present part of the class. And I've learned a lot. And and I think I think we've grown a lot. I've grown a lot with my students over that processing of what's going on there. So there has been a big change. And I wrote the piece, Boys to Men, largely as a kind of reach out, a correction to the hypermasculinist movement that I think is most pervasive now, at least among a
Yeah.
lot of the young men that I see at Hillsdale and in conservative circles. Some of it's sort of patriarchal, sort of embracing older, more rigid forms of patriarchy and strict role separation. Others are even flirting more aggressively with, I would say, kind of nihilistic, sort of
Mm,
downright sort of misogynistic ways of being men. And so I kind of thought, we need to offer models. I want these guys to see, I wanted to offer the possibility to them that these models that they are admiring so much are not really manly. They're actually kind of insecure compensations for real manliness. I
mm.
really wanted to sort of at least get a conversation going about what true manliness looks like. And that, by the way, turns out to be a super interesting and kind of fun inquiry.
Mm. Yeah, so can you say a little bit more about where you think this change is coming from, or what are the phenomena that are driving this change? You mentioned the internet and I think particular voices on social media, maybe even just the structure of social media and the way it works. But yeah, I'm wondering if you have any further thoughts on that.
Yeah, so obviously not a simple causal explanation. I think there are a lot of causal elements. The reality is probably pretty complex, but I would say number one, internet pornography.
Mm,
I think the pervasiveness of internet pornography is kind of like a sleeping dragon that is really consuming men's hearts and causing them to lose confidence in themselves, in their abilities, in their world, and also then to kind of cast blame and anger against the world. I think that's a sleeper there. But I
mm,
also think that the internet in general, as you just suggested, really, I think, has inbuilt incentives to press material into more extreme dimensions, because everyone is competing for attention and for clicks, and the most
yeah.
sensational and extreme clicks are going to get the most attention. And so I see lots of competition nudging more and more of the content and material into those more extreme directions. So I think those are two big drivers, but I also think that those alone may not be enough. I do think that they both are embedded into a background culture of um, of what we might call anti-masculinity.
Hmm.
We talk about this a little bit in class. I think to some degree, and this is no news probably to your listeners or readers. I mean, to some degree, liberalism is anti-masculine in a certain way. It's seeking to promote to tamp down thumos, aggression, highly competitive behavior, and replace with cooperative, peaceful, and productive behavior. And so, insofar as you no longer have a world where there's warfare, where there's competition, other things, the sort of activities in which men used to um, um, achieve their manliness are kind of gone.
Hmm.
But then we've had this aggressive radical feminism, and I'm talking second, third wave feminism that I think have sought to really undermine um, masculinity itself, to take it to the next level beyond even what liberalism might have done in itself, to make masculinity almost itself a pathology. And I would say, finally, and again, there are lots of different things here. People talk about the economy and work and other things, but I do, and this is something worth talking about. I do think that there's a lot to Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff's
Mm.
notion of this safetyist culture, this term they
Right.
coined of safetyism, that that's a very kind of mother controlled, carefully controlled and managed
Mhm.
environment of kids, with this kind of goals being shifted a little bit. I don't know what things were like when you grow up. For me, it was not safetyist. Free range was maybe an understatement. Um, and I don't want to simply celebrate that. I mean, there were
Yeah.
costs. Growing up in the 70s and 80s, I mean, we shake our heads. I can't even tell the stories to my kids yet of the kinds of things we did that everyone was doing in the 70s and 80s. But when my brothers and I get together, my wife just shakes she with disbelief, like I cannot believe, because she came from a family of almost all girls, whereas for me
Okay.
it was six boys,
Yeah. Yeah.
girl at the end. But the wives just shake their heads. You guys were sociopaths. Like, what were you doing? And um, and so I don't celebrate that, but I also think that
Yeah.
there were lots of virtues that we developed out of that we needed to do that are not replicated now. So I think
Yeah.
a lot of the guys come into, say, Hillsdale, and they come from good families. Most of them are not coming from fatherless homes. They're
Sure.
not, they're coming from intact families, religious families, conservative families, but um, I think very tightly managed families oftentimes.
Mm. Hmm.
And so the young men, and it's just a theory I have. All these are kind of theories. I've not
Sure.
tested them out with any hard data, but over time the patterns seem to be confirmed, that the men just kind of lack. They've not really had opportunities to engage in the kind of male bonding, initiation, risk-taking, courageous, stupid, idiotic rights that you laugh over later, but kind of know,
Yeah.
okay, I passed the test. I
Yeah. Yeah.
know I can do this. And so it's not surprising to me that these young men, 18, 19, they're good students. They've done well. They've, played a sport, played a musical instrument, done all the right things to get in, but they're kind of feeling like
Mm.
there's a wild in them that needs its out. And I
Yeah.
do think civilization in its best sense needs to leave some wild alive.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I liked in your article was you said that in your home you have a sign hanging in the bathroom, and the sign contrasts the difference between a boy and a man. And the contrast that's really stood out to me that I think gets at the heart of maybe misunderstood ideas about masculinity versus better ideas about masculinity was boys break things, men make things. My sense is that there's a sense among young men of a need to tear down. They have a very clear sense, especially if they're dissatisfied with the dominant stream of the culture as they find it in their university, or maybe even just kind of in the ambient world around them. It's very clear to them what they want to tear down, but it's not really clear what it would look like to build something up and to have that be the channel for their strength and abilities. So maybe just tell us more about the significance of that idea. Boys break things, make things, and why that is especially significant today.
Yeah, I'd love to do a whole session on a bunch of the things on that chart. There's some really good ones that have generated some good family conversation. And I would say just as before responding directly to that question, that uh, Aristotle points out that for every virtue, one of the vices comes close to the virtue, so
Mm,
close to it that it can mimic it and be confused with that particular virtue. And the one that stands out there is sort of courage and rashness, where um, the courageous person sort of Aristotle describes him as enduring the most difficult things for the sake of a beautiful good. And
mm.
so he keeps his mind focused on the beautiful good, and he undergoes all these great things because he's got it in his mind's eye what that beautiful good is. But the rash person, who is a vice opposed to courage, the rash person, um, interesting description. He's just seeking to kind of overcome or kind of show off, or he's seeking to mimic courage. But what he does is he ups the game, sort of like what I tell my students. I've never seen this show before, but I think Jackass is some TV series about, it must be mostly guys.
We're,
I,
we're dating ourselves. I'm not sure it's on anymore, but yeah,
I don't
it
need, I've never
was a
seen
TV
it.
show about guys doing dumb stuff, like what,
Yeah.
17 to 20 years ago or something.
And they one up each other, like,
Yeah,
and we know how this is, like, I resent a couple of my brothers-in-law. They don't quite take it that far, but it's kind of a thing they do. Like, who can sit in the ice bath the longest? Come on, come on. Like,
yeah,
it's 30 degrees out. This just happened at Thanksgiving. And I was like, I'm
yeah,
not going. I am not going to the ice bath. Come on, come on. And then my wife betrayed me. She said, you should really try it. And I thought, okay, now my wife did. So I had to go sit in the ice bath. And I was just, cursing my brother-in-law for sort of putting me in this idiotic situation
yeah, exactly.
to do this. So the point is that I think the alt-right masculinism sort of mimics courage, but it's really
Mm,
rash and
yeah,
brash.
yeah,
And so I think there's something kind of primal and intoxicating about breaking things for boys. I don't think girls share it. You see it. Um, I see it like when our families are together, the 4th of
yeah,
July, the guys just want to blow stuff up. They just want to get
yeah,
the fireworks going, and the
yeah,
women are scuttling around, screaming, grabbing the kids, and, come on, you're too close. And the guys are
yeah,
just, woohoo, this is
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, yeah,
And
exactly. Go
so
shoot some
there's
stuff.
something really primal about just breaking stuff.
Yeah,
My kids will make towers with Legos or blocks, and then just to like collapse it and make a big
yeah,
explosion. And so I don't know how to fully explain the kind of pleasure that I share of breaking a thing. There's something really satisfying about
yeah,
breaking things, and it feels um I don't know how to describe that satisfaction, but I think true courage, there's a real greatness in making things, right? It takes patience
yeah,
and time and care, and um it's not show offy until maybe the end. At the end, maybe it's show offy, but even at the end, no one sees the kind of greatness that you put into the production. That so making is so fragile and so
yeah,
difficult to do and requires so much character and virtue. And so I'm always trying to, this is one of the things that we've talked about, with the kids. So what are you making? So you're breaking stuff, but what are you making? And I liked your connection right there to, I
mm,
think, if I understood it correctly, to contemporary politics, right?
yeah,
I think that I see in a lot of, I think, I've been critical of some of the post-liberal stuff. I think post-liberalism, which occurred, roughly the same time I'm seeing this change in these young men. I'm
yeah,
not saying it caused it. I'm just saying there's a complex causal thing going on there. There seems to be sort of a desire to criticize and break, but not really much to make. And so I think one task for authentic manhood, recovering the gentleman, is is really encouraging the rebuilding and making processes, the slow, difficult work that's not flashy and showy, but is ultimately, I think, more deeply satisfying,
Yeah.
of protecting and bringing forward those sorts of orders we've been given.
Yeah, thanks. So another thing that I appreciated in your article was that you follow Plato in talking about the need for music and gymnastics in education, right? And I assume that you didn't mean like we should all learn to do backhands. If so, I'm education is out for me. That's not going to be something that I'm able to do.
Yeah.
But it struck me that the main trends in education right now, especially among conservatives or even more broadly among people who for whatever reason, dissent from the kind of dominant mainstream as it exists in public schools and in journalism and in our popular culture, the main trends tend to be focused on maybe a couple of things. Getting outside and having your kids really dive into nature and the beauty of the natural world. There's classical education, which cashes out in a variety of different ways, reading great books, inculcating memorization for younger students, Socratic dialogue for older students, teaching students the importance of rhetoric, right? And it is the kind of thing that is at play, not just for, white homeschooling families in rural areas, but in charter schools that work with minorities in inner cities. It's been very interesting to watch that sort of that movement unfold, but music and gymnastics are not really a part of the conversation. Maybe music a little more. So tell me what you mean by these things and why they're important for the formation of young men and women today.
Great question. So I get those terms from Plato's Republic, and Plato frames his whole education of the Guardians in books 2 to 4 on this combination of music and gymnastic, which he claims are the two basic constituent um, forms of education for making gentlemen, which the Greek word for that, the kala is kalos ka agathos, so the beautiful and good man, which I just love that definition of gentleman, a
Mhm.
beautiful and good man, not some fusty aristocrat in a tweed coat smoking a pipe, right? But someone who's truly beautiful and good. And as he develops his treatment of these in the Republic, it's really striking, the kind of insights that come out about really what I think are two kind of dimensions that are in tension with one another in human beings, especially males. I mean, it turns out later in the
Mhm.
Republic that maybe women have something parallel to this, but our focus here is men, and he's talking about men and that section of the Republic. So by music, he does not mean simply listening to music or playing musical instruments. He means the whole kind of poetic enterprise, which I think is really connected with eros, with erotic desire, with a desire for the good, right? A deep desire, longing in us for meaning, for purpose, for truth, and and the music side uh, prepares us to be disposed, I think, in what you might call a receptive mode for that.
Mhm.
It's a mode in which it's a mode in which you're actually willing to be vulnerable, and have humility and be a self-effacing so that you can sort of appreciate and affirm what's truly beautiful and good.
Mhm.
And I think that every man actually deeply wants that and needs that. And in its deepest sense, I think that's a religious move. I think that at its core, the music education is the religious education that brings you to Christ, the wholeness of your meaning, or to God. And if you don't have that, I think your manhood is going to be crippled in a certain real way. Plato's worry is that if you get only this music education, stories, harmony, rhythm, um, style, sort of directing Eros towards that beautiful good. He thinks that if you only are trained in that men will tend to become what Terrence Moore calls wimps. Or he thinks they'll become excessively soft and unmanly. They will be all about words and reasons and thinking and talking about things, but not hard enough to make to be protect to do the things that men also do, like overcoming difficulty or pain, or being aggressive to defend what is good, other things. So the
Yeah.
gymnastics side of the education is a side is the dimension of, uh, I think, maleness, but maybe human nature more generally, which is connected to what the Greeks called thumos, or spiritedness, which is really complex quality. So eros for music, thumos, spiritedness for gymnastic. And there is something in men which um, is bound up with a sense of self-respect, of self-dignity, of overcoming obstacles. And this is really where I think men today do feel crippled. Uh, Manhood, I believe, is much more fragile than womanhood. That is, manhood is a little more conventional. It's a little less a direct outgrowth of male biology. It's a little more indeterminate. It needs a lot more culture and help for boys to become men. And that indeterminateness can make things go awry. Manhood, it has been said, is something that's not, it's something achieved, something you have to achieve, and you have to receive. It's received. So it's really important there. So in gymnastic, what are you doing? You're doing um, uh, activities that require courage, activities that cause a little suffering, that have a high quotient of satisfaction, of accomplishment, of overcoming something difficult. But especially, I think it's important to do it with other men. The
Yeah.
gymnos, the gymnasium, you didn't just exercise alone in your basement. It was a communal thing. It was something
Right.
that the men were doing together, and frankly, they were doing it naked. And
Yeah. Yeah.
people talk about that, but we could make funny jokes about that as well. I'll resist them right now, but there is something kind of very important for men to be received by other men as an equal to them in some kind of
Yeah.
adversative activity. And so I think men are missing that today. And we need to figure out how to mimic that, whether that's some of the things you suggested, right? Getting out in nature. Nature walks are great. Mom can take them on a nature walk, but dad needs to take them fishing and hunting. And dad needs to be the one on the nature walk to say, hey, we're going to climb this rock now. And mom might say, oh, that's kind of dangerous. Dad says, okay, well, we're going to do it anyhow because Johnny needs to sort of overcome his fear and do this. And when Johnny does that, boy, he grows up that day. He
Yeah.
earns dad's respect, which he hungers for. He hungers for dad to say, great job, Johnny, you overcame your fear there. And he grows. And so, um, there's a program my brothers-in-law are involved with. I'll give it an endorsement on your podcast, even though I've never participated, because
Okay.
I'm a little too complacent and wimpy. But this program called F3, F3 Nation, look it up. It stands for something like freedom, faith, and fitness, or something like this.
Okay.
And it is really remarkable what this program has done and does with these men who get together at 5 in the morning, and they give each other nicknames, and they do some kind of exercise, and they kind of riddle each other. And then they sort of share a little bit, and they say a prayer, and then they're done for the day. And it looks to me, in talking to my brothers-in-law who are involved with, the same ones that, do the ice bath, so they're not entirely reliable, but their descriptions of this just are so impressive to me.
That's great.
The growth that the men they know have gone through in being involved in that. And they've done things with
Yeah.
their sons, substitutes for Boy Scouts, which is maybe Boy Scouts kind of lost its mission there, but there are lots of occasions for that, but boys need that.
Yeah. 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 That's great. Maybe one last question. What are some of the works of art and music and literature that you think capture what it means to be a man? And do you use these in your course that you mentioned? Are there other things in that course um, that you employ to try to form the young men, especially?
It's a good question also. You hit kind of a sore spot for me. I'm sure you have ambitions and goals that you think you'll never realize, and so do I. And one of them is just to do an entire course on manhood in fiction or
Mm.
manhood in literature and art, because what if you just stop to think about it for a moment, what great movie do you know of does not involve some kind of conflicted manliness? You could just start with Star Wars or take whatever, Darth Vader and Luke and Han Solo, right? And
Yeah, yeah,
Solo the real man, is Luke the real man? Maybe neither of them are. Maybe it's Yoda. I don't know, probably not. But um, the preoccupation with the Lord of the Rings, I think why it attracts so many young men is because it gives us these various models that are very different, but
yeah,
also important. The way Sam and Frodo are manly and they're hobbits, but manly and as a
yeah,
virtue, and the way Aragorn are manly are very different, but they're not more or less. They're different expressions of manliness. So when I think about this, I think there are good models. It's good to see bad models. I would teach, just off the top of my head, in a course like this. I would
yeah,
teach To Kill a Mockingbird. I mentioned that in my article.
yeah,
I think it's a great coming of age story. I would definitely have to teach Huckleberry. I'm sorry, Mark Twain, Tom Sawyer, uh, just because there's so much boyness in it. It is just classic. It's just outrageously funny for boys, the way Tom Sawyer gets these guys together, and they're going to start this pirate club, and you know uh seal their vow with blood, and
yeah.
there's so much, steal all the girls and everything. I mean, it's just too good.
Well, and some of those traits never go away. Like I worked for Feather Richard John Newhouse at First Things, and I realized during my time there that he was kind of like Tom Sawyer in that he could get everyone to paint the fence. And then, that's not to say that he didn't, that's not to say that he didn't work. He was extremely hardworking, but he never kind of bullied you into or pushed you to do things for him. He just
Mhm.
charmed you into doing whatever it was he wanted you to do. And I
Oh,
said,
it's so
wait a minute,
brilliant.
here I am like one of those kids that Tom Sawyer's put the paintbrush in his hand. So some of those things they keep going in life.
That's a figure for culture.
Yeah,
You just get the men to paint the fences. You need a good man to charm them into it. It's so
exactly.
good. I was thinking about Brave New World. I
Mm.
mean, that's not one you would expect really, but it
Mhm.
really, I teach that book in my social and political philosophy class, and it
Mhm.
plays so well, especially to the young men, because it it seems to them to exemplify the kind of culture we're living in. Uh,
Yeah,
Hyper civilized softness, dehumanizing, kind of pornographic entertainment, emasculating, and dehumanizing in so many ways. And then you get this John the Savage, right? Who grows up outside of that area and interestingly sort of is raised reading a Shakespeare book. So he's been
Mm.
formed by these models of men that he gets out of Shakespeare, and the clash that occurs there is really kind of deeply interesting and thought-provoking. A Man for All Seasons, awesome,
Yeah.
awesome book. The Mission, religious man, but same playwright, by the way. Robert Bolt wrote both of those
I
uh
didn't realize that. That's great.
screenplays for both The Mission and Man for All Seasons. So, I could think of a lot of,
Yeah,
almost everything.
the one I was going to throw in that I was just thinking of now is Chariots of Fire. That and I think there are certainly lessons that women could draw out from that as well, but maybe that paradigmatic contrast between Eric Liddell and Harold Abraham, and how are you going to order your life
Yes.
towards success? What is your understanding of what success and actually means? And for Abraham, it very much is a question of manhood and respect, and him being a Jew in a dominantly Anglican culture.
Yeah.
And for Eric Liddell, there's a way in which Eric Liddell's faith, allows him. Maybe on the one hand, he just doesn't face those same challenges. So there's maybe
Right.
just in inequality there between, in terms of what they're trying to overcome, or a difference in terms of what they're trying to overcome, but the way in which his faith allows him to transcend those concerns
Mm,
of Harold Abraham, and really attain something even more extraordinary and more beautiful. And that also it then allows him to overcome adversity, because he's not doing it just for his own, for his own victories. Um,
you
so
gotta
that's
write
one
that
I would
up.
maybe throw in there
You gotta
too.
write that up.
Yeah.
That sounds like a PD, a good PD piece.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll keep that in mind,
Serious, you know, it's got
and
the
think about
nice kind of contrasting sort of masculine types with their own challenges, which I think is so important. It's a dangerous to think there's only one type, you know,
yeah,
and then to feel anxiety that you're never making, you know, matching that when in fact there are lots of ways in which this gets lived out and expressed.
yeah.
So, I love it. That's a good one.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much, Nathan, for being with us today, for your article, and all the very best. We're recording this now in the middle of December, so all the best for the end of your semester.
Thank you.
And we hope to hear from you again soon.
Thank you, Nathaniel. Have a great
All right.
Christmas.
Yeah, take care, you too. Bye.